Well, I love, Tina, you talking about networks today and how they're a lifeline, because that's what we'll be talking about in our session, our conversation with one another this morning. One of the things when we moved Magnify online, we were really intentional about was trying to maintain, our hope was to maintain, I think we even made it stronger, all of the different networks that we bring into our classroom. And so today, with the help of the teaching team, we're going to talk about not only what we did, but how we did it. And we're going to start by handing it over to Stacy, who will be sharing our headlines with us. And then we'll move into the content of the day. So welcome, everyone. We're really glad to see you again this morning.
Good morning, everyone. So let's get ready for some headlines. Today, it's all about networks, like Betsy has mentioned. For today's agenda, we're going to be doing all that sort of reimagination through the lens of networks. And of course, we've got lots of resources ready to share with you. And we're so happy how many repeat faces I'm seeing in the crowd. And hopefully, we'll be able to have you join us for our final session on the 21st. All about culture that'll bring this 4-part series to a close. So can't wait to have you have y'all join us. And I can see a chat just popped up. I love sort of graphic design and digital arts. So this is actually one way I get to use one of my passions as a contribution. So this is a Procreate app on an iPad, but I can even make a tiny teach about that one day. The next thing I want to share with y'all is our tech check, which is one of our routines we have in the classroom. I'm loving all these upvotes to do a tiny teach over the headlines. It's a good energy booster.
Oh, and Sue's asking if you have a side hustle.
Come to
Magnify first, Sue.
I know, but it's over for the year.
Yeah, we're already getting started for next year.
So focusing us back onto our tech check, we've played with a couple different functions of Zoom, like mute and chat and enabling video, and we're going to do some more sort of video functions today. And we're going to do a little engagement activity to play with some of those functions and sort of demonstrating a simple way to bring and activate warmth in our classroom, into our Zoom room. And so we're going to be playing around with the Zoom views. So just take the next few moments and select gallery view out of the top right corner of your screen. You might already be in gallery view, and you can see that you could toggle between speaker view or gallery view. And you can see in this little slide here where the purple arrow is in step 1, how to toggle. So if we can, we'll close that for just a second, and I want you to just scroll between the many, for me it's 3 pages of faces and guests we have in our Zoom room today. So spend a few moments appreciating gallery view and using that time to wish everyone well that's come to join us today.
So many wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
And as we sort of bring that moment to a close, I'm going to ask Monica if you can screen share one more time. And we want to introduce how to spotlight. And so you can spotlight one person out of the group, which we loved to use whenever we had a guest teacher in the room, if someone was doing a guest lecture, and you have to be a host or a co-host. And one way you can get to that is to bring up the participant view. See, thank you for spotlighting me, someone on the team. and right click their name, and then a drop down box will open up and you'll see that you can spotlight them if you're the host or the co-host. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys had the step-by-step for that. I'm gonna spotlight Grace, and she's gonna help me demo a trick we learned from one of our favorite guest teachers, Chris Murchison. He introduced during his improv session how to warm the screen. And so Grace is gonna model that for us, and I'm gonna invite you all to join in too. So it starts out with you rubbing your hands together as if you have a precious pearl that you're shining and buffing between your hands. Build up that warm energy, those warm wishes for our community. And when you're ready, share that warmth back out to the rest of the community and bring it to your screen. And I'm gonna cancel the spotlight video, and hopefully you guys can see some of your community members trying this out. We use this trick from Chris often to help with transitions or when somebody shares something particularly authentic with the group. So thank you, Grace, for being our model, and hopefully y'all have a couple more tech tricks up your sleeve today, and I'll hand it to Monica.
Thank you, Stacy. I want to just build on and piggyback on what Stacy said for a second by highlighting the way we're thinking about networks when we're doing these things in our classroom. So we're thinking about networks as, of course, structural ties between people. So if you expand the people who are included in that network and you activate more participation across clusters of a network, you can also activate more helping, more belonging, more generosity in the network. So that's one way we're talking about networks today. Another way that we're talking about networks today, and I think the Chris Murchison's warming the screen activity is a wonderful example of this, is that networks carry energy and positive emotion, and networks cascade pro-social behaviors like generosity and helping. And so what we're trying to do with an exercise like warming the screen is to deliberately create conditions where it's more likely that our network, even though we have to pick up on each other with different cues than we would if we were in the same room, that we're still sharing energy and emotion through the network in this cascade style way of thinking about how networks work. And then finally, of course, we're thinking of networks as not just the number or structure of ties between people, but the quality of those ties and how we can ensure that we increase the quality of ties between all the people in our network, especially between the students who come together and find themselves in this class together and have a chance to get to know each other and form connections in a different kind of way than they might in other classes. And that's a mechanism that we use to think about creating thriving in our class. I think that's a good introduction to the way we're thinking about networks, Betsy. And I know we've put together some resources that you want to help us share.
So I would like to share with you our Padlet for this week. So we're building on the work that we've done earlier. Monica, would you like to share the Padlet, and I can walk through what's, just to refresh what's already there and introduce the new things that we have for today?
I will be glad to.
Sure. So we're building on our existing Padlet, which was our original thing that we shared with you. And we are going to show you how to make your own Padlets, but our intention is to share all the work that we do in our sessions and beyond for you to use this as a resource even when we're not together. So you can see that we've added a session 3 to our Padlet. But before we go there, I'd like to introduce the video resources. If you click on the video resources, that's where we have our Flipgrid videos. And there was one thing I wanted to call specifically to your attention if you're accessing our Flipgrid resources from this screen. And that is that you see right below the beautiful image, your role in soul introduction. But there's an arrow on the far right-hand side, and if you click on that, scaffolded below that are the other videos that we have. And one that we have new that we've added is Tiny Teaches. So what we have committed to doing when we heard you all loud and clear that you were interested in learning how to use some of the tools specifically that we use in Magnify is that we've begun to create a library of Tiny Teach videos where we're sharing exactly how we use the resources that we're sharing with you in class. There's 2 so far, one about music and how you can bring it into the classroom, and the other is about Jamboards, which is something that we've used beyond today's session. That's the one about Jamboards that Monica just selected, but we'll also be doing Padlets. We'll do a Tiny Teach about Procreate. I think I heard Stacy commit to doing that just a few minutes ago, to breakout rooms and a variety of other things. So this is the first look at a resource that we'll continue to build. But if Monica, you could go back to our home page and click on session 3. I just wanted to call to your attention some of the resources we'll be talking about today. The first is, well, we will have another Jamboard for today's session. We have pulled out just the Tiny Teach videos since that's new to our video library today. So this is going just scaffolded down and calling this up if we were for the students. For example, when we did a Science of Thriving library, we would pull out new academic resources that we've made available in our library. Additionally, we have an artifact from the Magnify class that we'd like to share with all of you, and of course a copy of our slides that are available for you to refer back to or to share with a friend.
Thank you, Betsy. Just answering Michelle's question that just popped up, and I'll try to pull this up a bit later, but yes, Michelle, I think someone else asked this. We use Padlet in conjunction with our Canvas site. Canvas is the University of Michigan Learning Management System, like Blackboard. And we actually installed a button right on the front homepage of our Canvas site that linked to our Magnify Classroom. And we use Padlet as basically the virtual 4 walls of our classroom. And so we made it so that the students could access our main Padlet right through the front page of our Canvas. And every time we did a tech check, we walked them through what they needed on Canvas that day, and then we clicked the button through to the Padlet, and we showed them what they needed to have open on the Padlet for that day. And so the Padlet became our kind of like a 4 walls of our classroom, where the Canvas was like the learning artifact related to how we shared reading and more formal assignment structures in the class.
And it was nice to build it into Canvas because the front door looked familiar to the students. It was the way they're accustomed to going in. So we modified routines that were familiar to them. But then once they entered our virtual classroom, which was our Padlet page, they realized they were in for something that they hadn't experienced before.
So let's come back to something we have said before, but it hopefully bears repeating. That when we're thinking about thriving classrooms in Magnify, what we are doing is always asking ourselves at every step of our design process, how could we do this in a way that simultaneously increases the students' engagement in the learning somehow, gets them active in the learning somehow? And how can we do this, whatever this task is, in a way that could support or increase or build their well-being? And the way we are thinking of well-being in this case is by thinking of this, the flourishing triangle of created and discussed by Jane Dutton. and specifically, how can we design anything we're doing in class to support building higher quality connections or positive relationships, building more moments of positive emotion, and building more examples and more sense of positive identities that matter to the students and matter to us, or that builds meaning and purpose into the work. And as we think about those three essential components of well-being, if we want to talk about them that way, we talk about them as resources for well-being using resourcing theory. We're also talking about that within a flexible social structure that supports and gives consistency to those resources and helps us know how to activate them. And so we started off talking about roles and how we reimagine roles flexibly in order to support engagement and well-being. We talked about routines in the same way. Today we're talking about networks in this way. And specifically, as I said, networks in terms of the structure of how people and things are tied together, networks in terms of the activation of cascading emotions and behaviors across the network, and networks in terms of the quality of those ties. So I'm going to stop there for a moment, and I'm just going to ask, before I talk at you more about networks, we are really interested in continuing to take the temperature and continuing to create things like Tiny Teaches that answer questions that you're curious about. So is there something you're still really curious about, or something that we've just touched on today that you would love to know more about? We're going to have this as a 1-minute chat activity, and we'd love you to just fill up our chat panel with any questions that you have for us before we go on and dive deeper into the 3 different ways that we're going to think about networks today. So as we do these 1-minute chat activities in our class, we often use this as a sort of a energy break as well. So changing up someone talking at the students to them acting in the chat panel, but also changing the kind of energy field. And we often did that through music. So I've asked Stacy if she could tee up a song. So while you're filling in something you're curious about in the chat, Stacy's gonna give you a 1 or 2 minute song while you work. Oh, come on, girl. All right, Stacy, thank you so much. Keep those chats coming. This gives us such a good sense of kind of where we are in our level of sharing and where we could build things that address different kinds of these questions. So thank you so much. Very helpful to us. I want to talk about networks in 3 different ways, and then we'll show you some of the things that we did in Magnify to use networks in these 3 ways. The first way that we, of course, think about the networks that we are embedded in as Magnify is that we're embedded in the Center for Positive Organizations, the Ross School of Business, and the University of Michigan. And that creates a network where we have CPO faculty, staff, and alumni and students as part of our network. We have all the amazing resources of Ross, of course. And we have access to the center's Consortium for Positive Organizations, which we have made more and more use of over the years to invite visiting speakers and to be hosts for our field work and our action learning projects. We invite visiting faculty and visiting administrators across the university to visit with us, and then what we call learning artifacts, right? The technology and things that tie all of us together are often dictated by this part of our network. So we use technology in ways that are mandated in some senses by our university, and then we try to build on top of them. The second way we think about networks is to think very deliberately about the students themselves within the class as a newly formed network who mostly don't know each other or know each other in a very cliquish fashion. And what we're trying to do is use everything that we can available to us as instructors and a teaching team to deliver the learning in a way that builds more density and more high quality connections across the student network. So we try to cultivate this class-wide identity as a magnifier and help everyone see themselves linked together. We do use fieldwork teams of about 5 students that endure across our whole program. We also use a small group structure that we called curiosity pods. You could think of these as similar to discussion sections, although ours were less formal than that, but these had an assigned coach. And then we use all the way that we think about assignments and deliverables in the class to try to also build the networks of students. So they do different kinds of activities together all the time. And finally, we specifically try to think of how our students become part of an enduring community of people who are dedicated to creating positive change in the world around more thriving at work and more thriving organizations. And we try to use our network in that way to make sure the students, as they travel through our program and as they leave us, are connected with people and resources and artifacts that will keep them learning and growing in this space if they so choose. So remember how to rename yourself. I'll just flash this on the screen. You mouse over your thumbnail, you pull down to rename, and you can type in the box. I think everyone has done it with us before, so I'll take the slide down. What we'd like you to do is now think of, last week we had this word cloud, and we asked everyone to fill in their feelings about how they were feeling about online learning and adapting to the changing circumstances. And we had lots of fear words like anxious, nervous, upset, depleted. So we'd love for you right now to think of a wish, a one-word wish that you would give to all those other beautiful people that you took stock of when you were looking through the network, as Stacy asked you to do. And rename yourselves. Keep your first name that you like to be called, but then type in your one-word wish for everyone else who's here facing their fears about teaching and learning in this way and learning together with you. So what's your wish?
So as we began our Magnify online journey, it was really important to us to recognize that we wanted to use the networks that we had established in the school and with our former alums in a way that strengthened the ties among our students who were enrolled online. So it was especially important for us to onboard not only our students, but the organizational partners that are part of our Action Learning course. As you may remember from the first session, students spend half of their time deeply immersed in the science of positive organizational scholarship and thriving, and the other half in the field working along our organizational partners. So we advertised to students through the university and the school networks in the way that we normally did, letting them know that we were here. We also welcomed recent graduates of the program to come back into the class and share highlights and impact with our current students. We brought in even more guest speakers than we would have been able to do if it were in person. We felt this was a silver lining because people could stop in. And so we brought in faculty and leaders to share meaningful work and their purpose and identities with our students. We even invited members of the administration and of our faculty to join us and sit in the back of the room, to show that the network extended beyond the students and instructors and guests, but to this greater POS community. And one of the ways that we helped students learn about the quality of the network, both in terms of its strength, its density, and the high quality of it, was by creating an artifact that we wanted to share with you this morning, which is called a wishing wall. So this was a new thing we created. So we used existing resources and we created new ones. This is another Padlet. And when the students arrived on the first day of class, we shared with them a wishing wall. Stacy had reached out to alums of the program to share a wish with the current class. Here's a wish from Madison, who's an alum from our second year program that Stacy's highlighting right now. So we had a dozen or so of our alums, maybe even more, from past years who shared a wish with our students. We then, as members of the teaching team, shared wishes as well. So we each included a wish in the wishing wall. So when they first walked in to our Zoom classroom, they were greeted with the network of students who'd come before them and the wishes of those students and alums for our currently enrolled students. Then when we invited our organizational partners in just a week later to onboard them to Magnify and introduce them to the program and the students that were in it, we invited our organizational partners to also share a wish on the wishing wall. When each of our guests came in, we invited them to share a wish on the wishing wall. We had business leaders, we had academic leaders, we had alums come in and share passion projects that they were working on related to POS. And then ultimately, as the students were preparing to leave Magnify, we created another wishing wall just for them to share wishes with one another as they moved out and thinking about their future and the way that they were going to be a community with one another. And so the wishing wall started at even before the students arrived with the network that was created in advance of the students, and then it ended with this elaborate wall with hundreds of wishes from organizational partners, from students, from alums, from the teaching team, and all that were affiliated with Magnify. So it was a tangible way for the students to, we repeatedly visited the wishing wall, expanded the way we used it, and a tangible way for them to see their network becoming bigger and more important to them. So that's what we wanted to share. And another component that we had that was really terrific in terms of our classroom and CPO network were our alum visitors. And I'm going to hand it over to Stacy to talk about how she orchestrated a beautiful way of having the alums spend a little bit of time with our students as well.
As Betsy mentioned, the wishing wall and having the alumni come in and leave these notes of well wishes and helping them imagine the great success that the current students would have in Magnify was one way to expand the current Magnifiers network. And we had another way for alumni to help expand the students' network as well, and that was by coming in to have a 10-minute Q&A session, essentially, with one of our recent Magnify alums. I sent out an invitation to our 5 years of alumni, and there were multiple ways that they could contribute. It might be through leaving a note on the wishing wall. It might have been by leaving a video on the Flipgrid, and there was also the opportunity to come visit for this Q&A session. And we actually had too many volunteers than we did the amount of days we could have in class. We told them to stick around for 30 minutes, knowing that our days were flexible, but we'd only need about 10 minutes of their time, and they would stay beyond that 30 minutes that we would ask of them because they wanted an extra dose of the Magnify classroom, and the current students were hungry to ask additional questions of them. But so when those alumni visited, we had the same 3 to 4 questions we would ask each of those visitors. We would ask them what they were up to now to sort of add color to what Magnify alums could do post-Magnify, whether it was out in the wild in the world of work, or if it was in their junior or senior years on campus. We'd ask them what their favorite session was from their Magnify experience and how Magnify was still showing up for them. And it was as if we had paid them for their stories because they were perfectly timed nearly every time. It was either something we had just learned the day before, or we were about to discuss in breakout groups after they left and logged off Zoom. It really worked. The universe conspired for us for those stories about their favorite moments. And then we also asked the Magnify alums to share what advice they would give to their first day of Magnify Self. And it might have been something that we on the teaching team had shared with the magnifiers as a best practice, but it meant so much more coming from the alumni, how to make the most of their experience. So those guest spots with the alumni coming in for just 10 minutes, which ended up as so much more, broadened the students' networks in terms of a resource they could ask when they were recruiting or looking for a job. It opened up their network for where people were in the world that were rooting for them. We had people all across the US to across the world, across time zones. And it also offered them an idea and their imagination for what their future role as a Magnify alum could look like, that they could come back, contribute to the Magnify community even after our 7 weeks of the semester came to a close. So we loved those days with the 10-minute spotlights with the alums, and we could see that the students were making new friends with those alums, and sometimes it was the student that actually encouraged the students to apply to Magnify. So some of our alumni even had fan clubs in our group.
So I'm going to move on to different ways that we think about tying the students together and cascading positive emotions and pro-social behavior across the network of students in particular. And as I do this, I'm going to address at a high level, and then I'm going to partner with Grace, who's going to talk at a more detailed level about using breakout rooms on Zoom, because when you're thinking about moving people through these activities where you're shaking up the network in a sense, and you're helping them interact with different people, you really need to become conversant or have a member of your team who's very conversant with using the breakout room technology. So if we just step back from that so you know it's coming, right? And we think a little bit about other ways that we were thinking about the students and their networks. We have baked into our deliverables and assignments some group assignments and some individual assignments. So there are ways that we're using the coursework itself to bring students together. Sometimes it's in formal standing teams, but of course they're doing fieldwork through the whole program that with one standing team. That's part of their coursework that's done as a group. We also have short 1 credit assignments that were done as informal groups, and kind of in the spirit of Amy Edmondson's idea of teaming. We would create rapidly created small groups of students who had to do a quick assignment together of some kind. And the stakes are relatively low, but it does use the structure of the class and the class deliverables to reinforce the importance of learning to work flexibly across the whole network of the class. So as I mentioned, we have these long-term teams that meet every day. They do assignments together every week, and they have a dedicated coach, a member of our teaching team, who is a coach assigned to their team who meets with them regularly as well. We created small clusters within the larger programs, in our program, about 12 students each, that we called curiosity pods. These are like informal discussion sections. They were facilitated by one of our coaches, but our coach was not put in the position of being an expert. So it's slightly different than having a discussion section with a TA who is assigned to be a teacher. We made it very clear that our pod leaders were facilitators who were there to keep the discussion going, but these small learning discussion structures were for the students to organize themselves in discussion and to engage. And we made sure that our pods had at least one activity per week to engage in. Then we have every day some kind of randomized dyad and triad activities to keep mixing up students so that they keep landing in a breakout room, or if we do this in an in-person class, they keep landing at the table next to someone new, and they have a chance to have a different kind of conversation and different kind of interaction. So that's how we use some of the other parts of the class besides just breakout room discussions to work across the network.
Hi there. As Monica just mentioned, breakout rooms were a huge part of our Magnify classroom every single day. We had students landing in a variety of different breakout rooms for team time or pod time or just one-on-one dyad discussions. And so it is very helpful, if possible, to have someone behind the scenes, whether it's a TA or maybe just a student stepping in to help you with this role of what I was called the breakout master during Magnify. And so behind the scenes, I'd be following along in our design doc to see what activities were coming next, so I could pre-place students into the teams they need to be in, or just have the breakout room generator make random team assignments depending on the activity. So it's helpful to have someone to do this because you can't really have them preset. You have to get the teams ready and the breakout rooms ready once everyone's already in the Zoom room. In addition, I used the rename feature a lot. This is different than renaming your name, but I would name the breakout rooms so I knew which org partner team it was, or which team or pod it was, so that if a student had a tech issue or joined late while we were in breakout rooms, I could easily place them in the correct room. So I would know which room had which team in it. So those are just a few tips that were really helpful when I was managing the breakout rooms. But as Betsy showed earlier, the Flipgrid video library with Tiny Teaches, I will be uploading later today a Tiny Teach on all the logistics and ins and outs of breakout rooms and some of the tricks that I use to make it really easy to manage them. So if you have additional questions, hopefully that video will be able to answer any of those lingering questions you have.
We're going to be preparing for our breakout now. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a breakout, or there is a Tiny Teach video about how to create Jamboards, and soon there will be, as Grace said, for how to create breakouts. But what I wanted to share with you is that we have a new Jamboard sheet in our existing folder. I'm just going to share, and you can see we now have a third page. And this one is about imagining how you could build your networks in a remote or hybrid classroom to help strengthen the quality of them and the experience.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We hope that the breakout room probably still felt too short, but not as short as last week. So slightly more spacious this time. And in conclusion, we have just two more ideas to share with you as we say goodbye. The first is that, I said we think about networks in three ways, and we've talked about two of those three ways, but I wanted to point to the last one as something that I'm sure that you all already do as a part of your class. We just have the opportunity to think about it and formalize it and talk about it today. So one of the things we're doing as we prepare students to take up the role of change agent in the world is connecting them to a more enduring community of other people who are thinking about creating positive organizations and creating organizational change. And the same for you, whatever topic you're thinking about, you're preparing people to join a community of thinkers and scholars who are either developing or using these ideas. And it's likely that you have the future graduate students and the future practitioners and leaders and change agents sitting there in your space. So we think a lot about how to connect them through digital and online resources in ways that they can stay connected. Of course, the Center for Positive Organization website is one important way that we do that, but we try to create a supplemental reading and video and podcast and resource list that's quite broad. It goes way beyond what's required for reading or listening or viewing in the class. And that's a way that we're connecting students to this more enduring community. We also had the opportunity this year to use a portion of our class to ask our students to attend the Center for Positive Organizations panel on race and justice. And then we used the first half an hour after they returned from that panel to discuss what they had learned about organizational change in relation to race, justice, and opportunity. So that was a great way that we could connect the students to subject matter panels and thought leaders that were beyond the walls of our classroom. And this goes hand in hand with us thinking about part of what we're doing as we build this network within the classroom itself is we're trying to help the students feel that once the class or program ends, they're still a part of a community that matters to them and that resources them and supports them through their whole career. So they're not just magnifiers in the classroom, they're linked to magnifiers everywhere. And all of you are magnifiers now, whether you know it or not. So you've joined our network of magnifiers everywhere. And our last word, I'm going to pass over to Betsy. We want to have more student voices in the room, and for reasons of time and pace, and because we're focused so much on the experience of delivering the class, we haven't had as many times when the student's voice can pop up, but we'll definitely focus on that a bit more for our next session. And we had an unsolicited message from a student that we thought was just perfect to close our focus on networks today.
Earlier in our chat, Tina asked, how can we assess our networks? And I think that the answer to her question is this. A letter that we received from one of our students after Magnify ended, that in essence outlines the role that each of the networks had in creating an experience that was exceptional for her. And so as you read through this, either now or later when you refer back to your slides, you'll see that she identified learning about the program through our established U of M networks and our alums, that she was supported through the program through our teaching team, and one of our leaders who also is donates to a scholarship fund to help support our students. That through her organizational partners, she connected, and through classroom activities and other students, with new students and even students in her org studies program who she hadn't known before, that she was able to really feel connected to. And then finally, through the outside activities that she was invited to attend, including a program on mindfulness and compassion where Monica was a guest speaker. I also added in our chat today an event that the center is hosting before we reconvene next Tuesday. So please share, or please click on that link that I shared, Unlocking Resources for Recovery, Renewal, and Resilience. A lot of people in our Zoom classroom today will be in that as well as presenters and attendees. And so we'd really love to see you there on Monday. And of course, back again for what we think will be our last session, although during the breakout we were imagining maybe having another pop-up session where we could just have conversations about all the wonderful questions that you guys are bringing forward in the chat. But until Monday or Tuesday of next week, we say so long. Tomorrow or Thursday we'll be sharing the video and the other resources from today's discussion, and we really appreciate you spending your Tuesday morning with us. Take care.